This week, Dr. Anthony Fauci was grilled by lawmakers on Capitol Hill on the COVID response, the origins, and the taxpayer dollars that went to the Wuhan lab in China. And twice now, members of Congress have grilled Fauci on third-party royalty payments. Auditors at watchdog group OpenTheBooks.com discovered $710 million in secret payments after following the money trail at the National Institutes of Health through the past 3 years. And joining us right now to break down this investigation is CEO and founder of OpenTheBooks.com, Adam Andrzejewski. Great to see you, sir. Good morning to you.
Great to see you, Jan. Good morning.
This is a very important investigation because the role Fauci played during the pandemic and because of the push for these mandated COVID vaccines. So what did your team discover?
Well, we followed the money and we found a hidden third-party royalty scheme that enriched 2,600 of NIH scientists to the tune of more than $1 billion over the course of the last 14 years. Here's the definition of a third-party royalty. It's when a government scientist in a taxpayer-paid lab has an innovation and then they license it to the private sector, think pharmaceutical company, who pays royalties back to the agency and the scientist. And Jan, every single one of those payments is a potential conflict of interest.
Yeah, and make no mistake about it, Adam, the payments increased during the pandemic. I saw the chart that you guys had. What was Fauci's testimony to Congress about his primary role during the pandemic?
Well, Fauci testified that his primary role was to create a COVID vaccine in his agency's vaccine lab. And that's what our data bears out. So Dr. Fauci and his scientists, they created the COVID vaccine and other COVID therapeutics. They licensed those to pharmaceutical companies. Those COVID vaccines and therapeutics then got special dispensation, emergency use authorization, and they didn't go through a regular testing process. And then over the course of just 2 years, nearly $700 million flowed back to 260 of Fauci agency's scientists at his agency.
Now, in his testimony, Adam, he stated he didn't personally receive any royalties from some of these COVID-related innovations, but hundreds of millions, as you mentioned, still went to thousands of other NIH scientists.
Yeah, and our data bears that out. We don't believe that Dr. Fauci personally profited on third-party royalties from the COVID innovations, but Jan, he created a system whereby thousands of NIH scientists received hundreds of millions of dollars on third-party paid royalties. The system actually was big government enriching big pharma and vice versa. Every single year, NIH doles out about $32 billion worth of grant making to the entire healthcare system across the country. Buys you all the research, all the healthcare innovations, and now we know coming back through the other door was $1 billion worth of third-party royalties over the last 14 years.
How is this not a clear conflict of interest? You got a government agency getting hundreds of millions from the very pharmaceutical companies profiting from a government-mandated vaccine. Fauci even admitted during testimony I was watching there that Congress can institute reforms on these third-party royalties. What did you consider the most troubling issue here?
Well, in the top companies on the most payments of third-party royalties to the National Institutes of Health and Fauci's institute itself, there are two Chinese vaccine makers owned by the Chinese Communist Party. So who knew that U.S. taxpayer innovations were being licensed to vaccine companies back in China during the same period when Fauci and other scientists were hostile to the lab leak theory, a theory that holds that the virus itself escaped from the Chinese laboratory at Wuhan.
So two of the top companies are by the Chinese Communist Party vaccine makers from the very place lawmakers have long said is where the virus originated. This is kind of mind-blowing when you think about all of the events that have happened up to this point. NIH also still not giving you all the information, Adam, as I understand it. I know you've sued them twice in federal court. What is still missing from the data, and how can Congress help with this?
Yeah, this is information NIH, Dr. Fauci, they never wanted us to know. They never wanted us to be able to follow the money. And although we can follow the money at the agency level, and we can talk about the $1 billion over the last 14 years with $700 million just in the last 2 years on these royalty payments, what we can't do is we can't follow the money to the individual scientist level. NIH is still redacting and blanking out the payment amounts to the individual scientists. So we need legislation like U.S. Senator Rand Paul. His bill on the transparency of royalties just passed a committee, 12-0 in the U.S. Senate. It comes to the floor of the U.S. Senate for a vote. It's a good bill. That transparency needs to happen. We need to be able to follow the money.
CEO and founder of OpenTheBooks.com, and Adam Andrzejewski, great job with this investigation. We certainly appreciate you joining us this morning here with it.
Thank you.